You might recall about 10 days ago, Statistics Canada came out with a report showing that in June, the number of jobs in Canada went down by 1,400. That almost never happens. And it almost never happens at the beginning of summer when all sorts of seasonal industries pick up, like agriculture and tourism, service, forestry. We almost always get more jobs in the summer, not fewer. But because of the Trudeau government's economic policies, because of its overspending, because of high interest rates and inflation, the number of jobs actually went down. And what was compounding that is the fact that the federal government is still allowing about 100,000 new Canadians every month. That adds 40 or 50,000 people who are looking for jobs every month. That's why since April of 2023, our unemployment rate has gone up by 1.3 percentage points. It's federal lunacy that's leading to bad jobs reports. But buried in that bad job report were another set of statistics I think you might be interested in. Since the federal Liberals came to power in 2015, the size of the federal civil service has grown by 40%. I think it's actually 39.9, but let's say it's 40%. At the same time, the population of the country has grown by about 12.5%. So the size of the federal civil service has gone up 3 times the size of the population. The size of the federal payroll, because they're now mostly, the new hires are mostly executives and managers. The size of the federal payroll has gone up by almost 60% since the Liberals came to power. Statistics Canada says now that under the Liberals, federal civil servants make on average about $45 an hour. And they can't process passports, and they can't do security clearances for military recruits, and they can't do this, and they can't do that. This is an incompetent government. And all the Liberals have done is hire more incompetents. They have all sorts of people working at home. You remember at the beginning of summer that the federal public service squawked when they were told they'd have to go back in September into the offices 3 days a week. They're supposed to go in 2 days a week now, and many of them do not. But my goodness, having the thought of having to go in 3 days a week was upsetting. They're not doing much at home, but they're getting paid a lot for it. And that has been a real drag on Canadian growth. During that time, during the period since the Liberals came to power in 2015, public sector employment has grown, as I said, by about 40%. Private sector employment, though, has only grown about 12%. And you cannot have a situation perpetually where you have more civil servants, more public sector workers, more people who work in hospitals, schools, universities. You simply cannot have a situation where you have more of those people being hired than there are people who are getting jobs in the private sector, because the jobs from the private sector fund the jobs in the public sector. But we now have this privileged class in Canada, under the Liberals, of federal civil servants who work fewer hours than the average, who get longer vacations, who retire earlier, who have better benefits, who have higher pay. And in fact, their pay is about $45 an hour versus about $35 an hour for the average worker in the provincial governments, municipal governments, and in the private sector. They are a privileged class, and they are acting like a giant bag of salt on the tails of the Canadian economy. They're dragging it down. They're not producing much. Indeed, the parliamentary budget officer said there are 7 layers of management for every employee who is on the front lines in the Canadian federal civil service. 7 layers of management. No wonder nothing gets done. Every issue, every decision, every report is bounced up and down and up and down and up and down among people whose only job is to review it, but not get in trouble. They don't want to make any mistakes. They don't want to be the one who has to take responsibility. And that is why our economy has slowed to a trickle. We will grow our economy this year in this country by under 1%. You simply cannot have that level of economic growth if you're going to have a prosperous country.